Hello and welcome to the Binary's first podcast series, Cloud for Utility. The show will highlight ways in which utilities are navigating from the traditional operations to advanced techniques. I'm your host, Nilesh, and today we are going to discuss in detail about how water and wastewater service companies can adopt cloud-based platforms and offer our amazing listeners a special surprise at the end of this episode. So make sure you listen all the way through for the details. Our guest today on the show is Lincoln Bleveans. He is a global energy, water, and sustainability executive at Burbank Water and Power. He is a thought leader and a speaker with passion for writing. Lincoln will share with us today his thoughts on the current transformation happening in the industry and how best water utilities can adopt it. So, hello, Lincoln, and welcome to our show.
Good morning. I know it's evening here, but it's morning there, very early.
Yeah. So, let me start you by asking Lincoln, what are the key challenges water and wastewater services facing after COVID-19?
Well, I think, COVID-19 has made the utility business, in fact, all businesses, but particularly the utility business, very challenging because we are not only running 24/7 operations, often that require people to be in very close proximity to one another, but they're also essential services. So there's no way that we can stop doing what we're doing. I think when you get closer to the customer end, though, especially with water, we are lucky to have a whole lot of smart meters, almost 100% smart meters on our water system, as well as our electric system. So that takes some people out of the equation, takes some contact out of the equation. But when we go to establish a new service or troubleshoot a problem or help a customer with being more efficient in their water use, we really have to think about that carefully. We have to think about that human contact. At the same time, though, the water use in Burbank has really changed with COVID. Our customers our big customers are commercial customers like Warner Brothers and Disney, big commercial customers. Their water use has gone down as their operations have a whole lot of work from home. The studios, for example, aren't doing as much production as they were before. But we're also seeing a lot more use on the residential side because people are home all day. So we're seeing a lot of changes. But overall, COVID or even without COVID, we're seeing a lot more demand from our customers for things like leak detection services. People want to know how much water they're consuming, and they want to be able to manage that. Mm-hmm. And even more than that, they want to have more visibility, more transparency on our system, more clarity about where water is coming from and how we make choices around water supply relative to both sustainability and resilience. So it's a very, very dynamic time in the business.
Yeah, and I think that's the case across utility industries. The commercial industrial production or the demand has gone down, while the domestic demand has been increasing. So and everywhere people are seeing the similar trends. So having said that, these COVID, the new challenges COVID has given us. So what do you think about cloud trends in water utilities and how important are they for the water and wastewater utilities?
I see the opportunities in the cloud as absolutely huge. I see efficiencies going up. I see the ability to avoid capital expenditure, avoid operating expenses. That's particularly important to us as a municipal utility, as a city-owned utility, because we don't have shareholders. We're not looking to create a rate base that we then earn on. We're essentially not for profit. So what we spend from a capital perspective, what we spend from an operating perspective goes straight to our ratepayers in the form of rates. And they're, of course, very, very sensitive to rate increases. At the same time, our wholesale water expenses are going up pretty dramatically year on year. And we have to buy all the water that we sell to our customers. So with that sort of rate pressure on the water supply side, anything we can do to minimize cost, both capital and operating expense, goes a long, long way in keeping our total rate pressure down. So I see a tremendous amount of opportunity, but at the same time, water utilities are very, very cautious about innovation. Historically, we have been in the business of providing, obviously, clean water with incredible reliability and as low rates as possible. And that creates a very, very conservative mindset, especially because most people don't think about utilities until they turn off. They think about utilities until something goes wrong. So we're very, very worried about the downside risk of things going wrong. And we're very rarely rewarded on the upside for things going really, really right. There isn't much of a really, really right, in the water business. So when I look at the cloud, I see an opportunity to decrease capital expenditure on things like servers. I see an opportunity to decrease operating expense in terms of operating the system and billing our customers and providing services to our customers. But I also see an opportunity for much more flexibility in that so many things are now driven by both the products and services we can provide to our customers, but also looking at what we do through a fresh pair of eyes. Looking at the data that we now have from our meters, the data that we now have from the system, managing that data, but also a renewed emphasis on analysis. Utilities tend to be very year-by-year enterprises. We do the same thing this year that we did last year. And so the idea of really deeply analyzing our business really doesn't come into the picture very much. We see ourselves basically trying to do a little bit better than last year, or do the same thing we did last year with slightly increased costs. I see an opportunity, and this is electric and water and all sorts of utilities, to look at analysis from a much more robust perspective. And that means capturing all this data that we're now getting and managing it and really leveraging that data. And those things, that's a new approach for a lot of utilities, certainly Burbank Water and Power.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And with the COVID kind of situation, when there is a remote operating demand, people want to work remotely. In that scenario, the cloud can provide a lot of flexibility to people to have the systems, anywhere, anytime kind of situation.
Yeah, and that's I think that's another big part of it, is that with people working from home, they're getting used to having the world, trying to find my phone, having the world at their fingertips, that literally having their whole world in their iPhone, and not only being able to find information, but being able to make decisions and manage their lives through their phones. And I see cloud technology as a way to really supercharge the ability of a utility to be more like, to allow people to interact more like they do with their bank or like they do with a retailer. Some utilities are very, very good at that, but most utilities are only kind of, we're in the beginning of that process.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense, Lincoln. So when utilities do understand the potential of cloud, what kind of risk they foresee, or what kind of risk they are afraid of when they want to implement the cloud systems, Lincoln?
That's a great question, and it's a very large answer. So I'm gonna try to break it into parts. I see two primary risks from the utility mindset, the utility perspective. One is reliability, and the other one is security. When we think about reliability, again, our business is a function of simply never stopping, of providing electricity or providing water or what have you, on an absolutely reliable basis, or as close as we can humanly come to an absolutely reliable basis. So every aspect of that business, every link in the chain, so to speak, in the value chain, has to be reliable, because you're only as reliable as your weakest link. And so what that has fostered in the utility business is an intense desire for control, an intense desire for control. The idea of taking a critical link of that system, such as information flow and decision-making tools, and outsourcing that, taking that out of the utility, out of a server that I can go and visit in a server room, and know that I have control over. That's a very, very difficult thing. And that's generations of mindset that want that control, because they want to control that reliability. Exactly. Now, the other part of it is security, and that ultimately that comes down to control too. You look at the utility value chain, and it's no longer just a linear, non-digital relationship where we provide the water and we send the bill and somebody sends us a check back, right? It's now this multifaceted value chain, almost fully digital now. So you're looking at a situation where there are parts of that we control, there are parts of that we don't, and there are if I was looking to do damage, there are multiple avenues that I can get into that system, many of which are no longer under my control. And I think back, and this is a little bit morbid, so I apologize, but I think back to the 9/11, the September 11th hijackings, which to me were terrible. I was in New York at the time. I have family who were down there, but the hijackers didn't get on at the big airports. They got on at the little airports. They got into the system where the system was small and vulnerable. And I think of a smart meter at somebody's house. I think of a smaller utility, for example, that may not have the intellectual horsepower or the money to really truly safeguard things from a cybersecurity standpoint. And then once you're in the system, you're in the system. Obviously there are firewalls and security, but I worry a lot, and this is a very typical utility mindset. I worry a lot that by increasing the points of entry and increasing the number of companies and people that participate in that system, that we are putting ourselves potentially in a situation where the water could get shut off. And it doesn't take much to shut down a city, or it doesn't take much to shut down a company. When the water stops, pretty much everything else stops too. So I worry about that. I know there's a lot of technology, and there are a lot of very, very smart people who worry about that every day. But at the same time, I know that there are a lot of very smart people who want to invade that security. And so I worry, and I think as the utilities in general worry, that cybersecurity is going to become more and more challenging, simply because of the digitization of the system and the number of points of entry and the lack of control over a lot of those points of entry. On the other hand, as I described, the benefits are so big that we've got to figure that out. We've got to figure that out in a way that we'll never take all the risk out of the system, but we have to reduce it to an acceptable level of risk and a risk that we can hedge. So it's incredibly exciting. If there was a movie in the US, 50 years ago, and called The Graduate, And the young college graduate is asking an older person, what should I do for a living? And the older person in the 1960s says, plastics. Plastics, that's the wave of the future. Get into plastics.
Yeah.
If I were having that conversation today, I would say cybersecurity, because it's just the whole world, the Internet of Things, everything will be defined. Everything will have an underlying layer of cybersecurity. And again, it's a huge challenge, but one that we have to figure out. And I'm confident that we will figure it out. But boy, it's a large challenge.
So, considering this opportunity and the key risk, Lincoln, what do you suggest? Like, if we have to make a suggestion to small and mid-sized wastewater service companies in terms of moving cloud. So, what will be your suggestion, and why? Why they should adopt the cloud going forward?
I think there's first of all, from a business perspective, I think your fundamental posture has to be leaning forward into the cloud. I see that the opportunities for cost savings, the opportunities for providing services to your customer, providing efficiencies in your supply chain are just too great to ignore. So you can't ignore it. You have to lean into it. But you have to lean into it with a very, very sober understanding of what you're capable of doing and what you're not capable of doing. I think this is an area that the bigger utilities, they're going to find, by and large, their own people and build their own systems. But when you look at everything being part of the Internet of Things, and literally every aspect of the utility being cloud-based or cloud-adjacent to one extent or another, I think it's very, very important that utilities lean in. I'm going to mix my metaphors. Lean in, but with their eyes very much wide open, and understand that this is incredibly complicated, and it's incredibly fast moving. It's incredibly dynamic. So this is an area where a very, very careful outsourcing is incredibly important. That said, I think there's another layer there too, because this is so mission critical, but also has such challenges from, say, a cybersecurity perspective. I wonder whether, and this goes for both electricity and water, whether there is a place for some sort of government oversight body. I'm thinking of NERC, the National Electric Reliability Corporation in the U.S. Some sort of government body that's not going to mandate what you do, but they're going to mandate a level and test a level of cybersecurity and a level of reliability for these systems, so that, especially for the smaller utilities, they can have standards to meet, and they can have an oversight, not a mandating regulator, but an oversight regulator that will provide a reliability and a cybersecurity oversight to the entire system. Much like we have in electricity right now with NERC. So I think those are ways that we can try to get as close as possible to perfect, in other words, an acceptable level of risk, while still grabbing all the opportunities that come along with this. It's never going to be perfect because we're human beings, but I think we can get very, very close to perfect with this.
Yeah. And with moving to cloud, Lincoln, do you see the opportunities for a different kind of collaboration? For example, look at the way people have adopted Zoom, right? In the video context, the conference context, the entire game has been changed. Look at the Uber kind of model, which is a cloud-based model again. The entire collaboration has gone to a completely different level. the Slack, another example where, at the enterprise, the communication has gone completely to a different level. So if utilities, decide to adopt the clouds, do you see on the collaboration front there are the opportunities for them?
I do. I think it all comes down to disaggregation or disintermediation of the industry. And I think that with the information flows, not just the instrumentation and control at so many different points in the process, but then the ability to move that information to different parties, especially for smaller utilities, I see tremendous opportunities to aggregate, say, customer service. I'm not sure why, especially smaller utilities, are more efficient with their own customer service. You see this with it. There's an analogy to call centers here. Obviously, their own customer service, as opposed to farming that out, subcontracting that out to another party. But I see that, and we're only we can barely see over the horizon here. In 10 years we'll have great answers to these questions that we haven't thought of yet. But I see tremendous opportunities to basically reshuffle the industry, who's providing what, and who's controlling what. I think the larger utilities will, for the time being, continue to have vertically integrated businesses, full service businesses. Mm-hmm. But I think more and more parts of the business, some that we see as absolutely fundamental to the business, even will be outsourced based on this incredible access to and manage the ability to manage all this data coming from all these points in the system. So I actually look at the utility business, whether it's electric or water or telecom or what have you, 10 years from now, and I really don't know what that's going to look like. I think about, there's a famous picture of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak back in the late 1970s. They've got these fantastic haircuts, from the late 70s. And they're sitting with one of the early prototypes of the Macintosh, or the Macintosh computer. And, two of the smartest guys who've ever lived, but they're looking at this machine that they've just developed. Are they thinking about cloud computing? Are they thinking about computer-aided design and manufacture? Are they thinking about the iPhone? Probably not. Yeah. But they see this machine, and I'm guessing they know it's got immense potential. But I bet they also realized at the time that they had no idea what that potential was. So what's so exciting to me is that with the cloud and the utility business models, plural, and the intersection of the cloud and the utility business models, we're like those two guys. We know the future is going to be incredibly dynamic, and we know that there are going to be things that are so cool that we, at this moment in time, can't think of. So that, to me, is why it's so exciting to be in this business, because we're just at the beginning of innovation. We're just barely at the beginning of innovation. And, the world in 10 years is going to look, I think, just fundamentally different, and and the process of getting there is just going to be incredibly exciting. So, I wish I had great answers, but I can see that process happening. I can see that laid out before us.
Yep. And thank you very much for these views, Lincoln. It's really insightful, and absolutely, we appreciate your views.
Thank you. Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. It's great stuff.
So, these were the 4 questions we wanted to, take your views on. So, thank you very much for your time, Lincoln. It was great having you on our show. And thank you to our listeners I hope you learned some interesting facts about water and the wastewater service companies and the shift it's underway. So thank you, Lincoln.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Cloud for Utility podcast. We really enjoyed talking to Lincoln about what it takes for water and wastewater service companies to become technologically advanced powerhouses. We especially like what Lincoln spoke about risks perceived by utilities and how utilities would like to mitigate them. Want to learn more about what we talked about today? Subscribe our channel and we look forward to your thoughts in our comment section. Catch you next week on next episode. Our podcast will be live on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcast as well as on Bynry's LinkedIn page. Thank you.